Hey guys, so in this video we're going to look at how Jim analyzes ESR. We're going to analyze both his 700 and 770 ESR. We're going to look at what he deduced from his ESR and how he took those reductions into his improvement plan, and then once he executed his improvement plan, how did that improvement translate into that 770 score, and how's that reflected in that 770 ESR. Now, whenever you think about an ESR analysis, one of the most important things you've got to really do is define the gaps into three buckets. One is whether the person has scored or not reached his or her target GMAT score because they have an ability gap, or whether they have, they have limited test taking skills, or whether their score is limited by test taking skills. And this is where timing, warm up effects come in, or and for some people it may be just both one and two that may be limiting their overall score. So regardless of whether you're talking about a 700 ESR, a 650 ESR, a 600 ESR, or in fact even a 750 ESR, whenever you're looking to do an improvement plan, you want to make sure that you put those gaps in one of these three buckets. And when you do that, you have a very clear improvement strategy right in front of you. So with that, let's kind of analyze the 700 ESR. I'm going to start with this ability section now. Now, to make this easier, I've taken the screenshots. If you go to his debrief, you can download both his 700 and 770 ESRs, and you'll be able to follow along as well. Now, right off the bat, there are a couple of things that jump out at us. So one is this gap, and then I want to make sure I get my pens right in that critical reasoning section. So 39 percentile and then in sentence correction, 69 percentile, both fairly low scores, especially given the fact that Jim was aiming for a 750 or higher score. Now, this is despite the fact that he spent ample time in CR as well as in SC. In fact, the only subsection where he hasn't spent enough time, I would argue, is reading comprehension, where his ability score is 85th percentile. Now, if you look at his progression chart, which is what we have over here, you'll be able to see how the test was able to deduce this lack of ability. Jim did really well in block number one, and you can see, he made one mistake. This one mistake was on an extremely hard question, and then pretty much questions that were easier, he got all of them right. Now, as a result, the test did throw a few more challenging questions at him. Why? Because you can really see there's this one question that's wrong over here, and as the difficulty level went up, Jim made a lot of mistakes. In fact, he pretty much got 60% of the questions wrong in block number two. You can really see that the overall difficulty was higher. Why? Because even though he got only 43% of the questions right, this average difficulty of questions correct went up. Now, because of the number of mistakes, the test did throw easier questions at Jim. And this is kind of where in block 2 and block 3, the test was able to figure out that as you increase the difficulty level of questions, Jim's ability to answer questions correctly consistently went down. Now, as the test reduced the difficulty level, Jim, even though he got, close to 70% of those questions correct, he did make mistakes, and you can really see that average difficulty incorrect versus correct is very, very similar. And this is where the test kind of said, okay, I kind of have a good handle on what your ability is. Let me just throw another block and see if there's any other juice left in you. And this is where in block number 4, this is where Jim actually faltered badly. Again, this was at the cusp of his ability. This was, in my opinion, at the higher end of his overall verbal ability, and as you can see, Jim faltered. He got half the questions wrong, and in fact the questions that he got wrong were more challenging. The questions that he got right were easier questions. As a result, his overall ability estimate went down slightly. This is where he ended up with a V34. Now, you can usually, when I do this, I also look at this performance over time, and you can really see that one thing is overall good test taking skills. Block 2 is slightly higher time, but it's not that he was short on time. But one thing that I would I kind of recognize right off the bat is that a minute 45 in block 4 is good, but at the same time, questions that he got wrong, he spent a lot longer than a minute 45, which is where you can see this with this things. But 7 out of 5 or 7.5 out of 12, and this is 4.5 out of 12. So a lot higher, wasted a lot of time. So even on these questions, the thing which I want to say is truly lack of ability that limited him. Why? Because the question that he got wrong in block 4, he did spend ample time on those. Now, with this in place, Jim did start working on his ability. When it was very, very clear his performance is limited by ability. and that too particularly in CR and SC. And this is where he worked on his pre-thinking approach as well as his performance in sentence correction. And let's kind of look at his stats over here. Let me bring some of his stats. So he worked on the e-GMAT platform. You can really see how as he improved his ability in SC and CR and hard questions, he was able to hit that 70% accuracy consistently. You can see how he's improved from last 30 in hard to last 10, and this is where it's really important to make sure you track this improvement overall. Now, what did he do to do this improvement? He focused on the meaning-based approach when it comes to SC, as he talks about in this debrief. He also focused on learning pre-thinking and practicing questions using pre-thinking. He actually went through the CR course, all the application files again, and to make sure that he was able to imbibe that pre-thinking approach. Now let's look at a 770 ESR, and I think it's a lot more interesting to start from the progression chart over here. Again, right off the bat, you can really see his first block performance is very similar to his performance in his first attempt, where in the first attempt he got 7 out of 8 questions right. Here he got 6 out of 8 questions right. But again, you can see when he made mistakes, the questions were a bit more challenging, and his accuracy on the question that he got right, they were slightly easier. Now, similar to what happened in attempt 1, the test did throw more challenging questions at him, and Jim did make more mistakes here. He got 60% of the questions right, and if you remember in attempt 1 he got 40% of the questions right, so definitely an improvement. But I think the bigger piece which was there was he only made mistakes on really hard questions. So you can see this top blue line is almost straight, and again, because the overall difficulty was higher, the questions that he got right were more challenging. Now the test was a bit more worried about the fact that he got 43% of the questions wrong. As a result, the test did throw easier questions at him, and you can see he got all of them correct. So clearly he told the test, hey, the question picker on the test, that you've got to throw more challenging questions at me because this is clearly below my ability level. One of the other things which will tell you that he sailed through this is look at this timing piece. I mean, a minute 41, which is a lot lower than in 2 minutes 18 that he took over here. And this is when the test did throw hard questions at him, because that's all he could do, because as the test eased the difficulty, he got everything correct. And at that point, because of his higher ability in CR and SC, Jim was able to do a majority of those questions. In fact, an overwhelming majority of those questions right. And again, with very similar timing. And one of the other things you can see the improvement in test taking skills is Jim didn't focus as much on questions that he didn't know or when he was confused, which is where his time on incorrect questions as a proportion is a lot lower here. In fact, in the previous test, this was over here, if you remember. And that definitely also had it. So in addition to that high ability, this had an impact on his ability to answer questions correctly. As a result, as you can see over here, his ability estimates for CR and SC were off the charts, 94th percentile in both CR and SC. It's incredible considering that he was 39th over here and 63rd over here in the first attempt. His RC more or less remained the same. So what does this mean for you as an individual when you think about your improvement journey? I think one of the first things you've got to figure out is, where do you lack? Why? Because regardless of what your ability is, it tells you if Jim could improve from 39 to 94th in about 20 days or so, so can you. As long as you identify where you lack, where you're faltering. If you can identify those gaps, you can put in focused effort, you can learn the right methods, and you can improve. The second thing which I think is really important over here is to understand that on the GMAT, don't worry about the first block or the second block. I mean, Jim didn't really start very well in the first and second block over here. You can see his accuracy in these two blocks isn't great, but he made mistakes on more challenging questions. So as long as you tell the test that you have the ability to answer those easy, medium, hard questions correctly, the test is going to continue to throw more challenging questions at you, and you will make mistakes on those. And as long as you make mistakes on those hard questions, that's okay. In Jim's case, out of the 30 questions that were evaluated for him, based on my estimates, he got 23 of them correct, which again, if you think about it, is is slightly is around that 70% accuracy, and he was able to get 90. His ability score was 96 percentile. So again, how is that possible? Because he told the test or demonstrated to the test that he had high ability, or he made mistakes only in more challenging questions. How do you build that ability? You kind of focus on learning the right methods, and you focus on hitting the metrics internally, which is, if you're an e-GMAT, make sure you hit that 55, 60, 65, 70% accuracy on hard questions in Scholaranium. So learn the right methods, hit the metrics internally. If you do that, you can go from that 600 to 700, 700 to 750, and in fact even 770 like Jim.